end, but there we go. Well, let me just tell you, here's what matters is that you look cute.
Do
You know
I?
what I
I
mean?
didn't even look in the mirror. Like it's been a while.
You look cute. And I feel like that's the most important piece when you're doing your very first YouTube live because, this is the one that we're going to embarrass ourselves with later on in life. Let me just tell you. You know what I mean? It's the one that's like, after we've done a million of them, they'll be like, let's go back and review the first one where we look stupid. And so this will be it, but at least you look cute. So there's that.
I didn't put in my fancy earrings though, like you.
Listen, my friend Jenny calls these my anal bead earrings. And so now I see that I wear them and I'm like, it's all I can see also. So I think this is the last day that these are going to exist because I think I won't even donate them because I would not want somebody else's friend to be like, hey, let me tell you what those look like. It's not fair. We're doing
Oh,
something, what's that?
that's funny. That's just very funny.
We're doing something different today. This is content that I taught a very long time ago to a very special group of women who are in my group coaching group called the Underground. And so they were often saying to me, like, but how? Like, how? Like, I know that you work with people and you teach them all the stuff you teach in the Get the Hell Out of Debt program. And I know that then you do a bunch of mind work with them, which helps them overcome their blocks and stuff that help them become millionaires. But like, what specifically? And I was like, well, it's different. It's different for everybody. It's like a custom thing. So what I thought I would do is I would teach you what I did with three different people. I chose three different women that sort of represent a lot of women. People might feel similar about, their money as these women did. So I thought I'll show you exactly what I did with each of them. And maybe you can see a piece of yourself in one of them or some of their struggles so that then you can implement some of the things that they implemented so that you can get yourself to where you want to go also. The thing that I want to say is this, I've only ever taught the first one. So I did this first case study with the ladies in my coaching program, and it took an hour for just the one. So listen, we might be here a while, okay? But I want you to have all the information. And if you have to come back and watch this as a replay, you can come back and watch this as a replay, okay? I know you're busy women, you got lives and kids and all kinds of things going on in your life. So I just want to make sure that we over deliver for you today. That's the point. Why is your mouth still agape? Are you like, do you have somewhere to be soon?
No, but also like I I I don't know if I have enough water. Like I feel like I might need a mint. I am gonna need, I don't know. This is so exciting. But I mean, I understand because I had a quick peek at your slides. And I was like, there's no way that Erin's getting through this in an hour. There's no way. So the other thing is though, I
Yeah.
did see a sneak peek of this. Everybody watching, this stuff is so good. Like these are things that Erin hasn't taught before. Like to a wide group of us. Like these are things that I have never seen before. I actually got goosebumps. I have goosebumps like right now. This is really good, like information on how three different people became millionaires. And I know already that I'm going to go back and back and back. Like I'm going to have to watch this more than one time for sure.
What's cool about all of this too is some of them because when they hired me or started working with me, you're the one that books all their sessions. And so you like you won't know who they are. I don't use their names or their details, but like what's cool for me is like you actually know these women. And so anyway. Okay. Are you ready? Everybody ready? Tell me you're ready in the chat if you're ready. Okay. You're going to be really engaged in the chat because I'm going to get you to do some homework in the chat for me so that I know what's landing and what you need help with so I can clarify and verify as we go. Okay. So this was the slide that was supposed to say we're starting very soon, and then we just started. So ignore that slide. Okay. This client went from $0, pretty much $0, somebody who typically spent her entire paycheck every month, to having what we call two commas. Isn't that fun? Two commas.
I love
She
two
went from
commas.
0 commas to two commas,
Two
which is
commas is always better than one comma.
two commas always better than one comma. The more commas, the better. So what happened was she, before we met, had been a chronic overspender. I don't know if anybody can relate, but she was somebody who was always caught up in this sense of urgency as a consumer. So if people were marketing to her, she was like, I'm in. Like, I'll buy all the things. Everything for her was a must and everything was urgent. And she could convince herself of anything. Like if she wanted to buy something, she could find a reason. You know what I mean? She had no fiscal literacy, so no financial literacy. So she'd never done the Get the Hell Out of Debt program before. And she was using credit to meet her urges. She was living by payments. So she didn't look at whether or not she could afford something. She looked at whether or not she could afford the payment. And she had no understanding of her net worth. She'd never done her net worth before, but she was like, she knew what income she made. And she, would send her stuff to her accountant. Her accountant would file taxes and off she'd go. But she didn't have an understanding of how all of her money worked together. Definitely had no idea how to actually build wealth. So that's really important. Can you do me a quick favor and check YouTube for me and see if you can see the slides on YouTube, or
Yeah,
tell me how I can see
I'm
the slides?
seeing it. I have it. I just pulled it up on my phone and I can
Oh,
see
great.
all the things.
Great. Okay. So we came up with a six-pronged plan of attack. And when I say we, I say me, because um, a lot of times when I'm working with you, I don't, and you should know there's no pitch coming at the end of this, because I know sometimes this sounds like I'm teaching a bunch of things, and at the end I'm going to be like, and if you act now and throw it, like there's no pitch at the end of this. This is literally just a gift for you to have. Um, but when I work with you, I don't always tell you why I'm doing the thing I'm getting you to do, because I don't want you to outthink yourself. Anybody do that here? Anybody an overthinker type? I used to be an overthinker in the chat box, if you are someone who identifies with that. So we came up with a six-pronged plan of attack. The very first thing that we had to work on with her is discernment. So she talked a lot about a lot of things. And so I put here that broke people blab, wealthy people discern. And I'll go into that in just a little bit. But you'll often find the people who are the wealthiest, people that you might know, aren't the loudest people. They're often quiet and they're very observational. And so we had to cultivate that habit in her, because she was a little bit frantic in her energy, and she would be like talking about this, and she'd see this program over here and she'd be like, what do you think about this? And she'd be asking everybody their opinion on finances, but didn't do anything with it. So she didn't actually have the knowledge. She was just sort of, and we had to create this scenario for her where she could really discern, instead of going around asking 700 people's opinions on things, like, so she could really discern for herself and become a critical thinker. So I basically said to her, your big job for the next 6 months is to shut up. That's the wealthiest thing you can do right now, is shut up. And
Did
she
you
was like,
actually say that? Did you say those words? Like,
kind of, but we were like, you know what I mean? We're in a climate. It's like I said it to you. She knew I didn't mean it in a mean way.
yeah, yeah.
She knew that, like, okay, we need to listen more. We need to pay attention more. We need to stay centered and observe.
Mhm.
Okay. Stop like going out and shopping and justifying and being like, yeah, but this was 50% off and this was it. Like, just stop and listen and be quiet. Okay. So that was the first thing, and you'll understand why in just a little bit. Okay. The second thing is I taught her that privacy is the ultimate currency. So she would often like tell everybody all of her problems. She loved to connect with people. She loved to be in community with people, which I think is really cool.
Mhm.
But it often meant she was somebody's prey, because she would go to a party or something and, talking about what she did for a living, and people would be like, oh, and they'd realize, oh, she probably made a good income. And so they'd often try and sell her something, or they could see her almost in a position of weakness. And so I had to really work with her on, like, not everybody needs to know everything about your life. We need some boundaries, because, again, as everybody knows here, how you do some things is how you do everything, right? So if we are lacking privacy when it comes to our finances, we're definitely lacking privacy when it comes to relationships or whatever. And being somebody who can be somebody who's trusted is really important when it comes to finances. If you can't be trusted with other people's secrets, you can't be trusted with your own money. I promise you there's a correlation there. So then we handled the privacy situation. And then we had to look at what her income was like what was going to be the potential for her. Now, she was an employee of an organization, so she wasn't a commission person, or like sometimes people are self-employed and they can kind of write their own check, right? She was paid a certain amount to do a certain job. So we went to her employer, and I say we all the time, but I mean her. Like, I made her do this. Okay. I didn't go to her employer,
Yeah,
but
but this is just like that just shows how invested you get though, because as soon as people start working with you, it's not I and you anymore, it's
yeah,
we.
I know. I'm always like, too, like, how's our boyfriend doing? How's our, and so she needed a different level of income. But, everybody at her same sort of job description was making the same kind of band of money. So we had to figure out a way to make it exciting for her employer to enroll her in a different income level. So we went to the employer and we were like, what do we have to do to earn more money? Like, what do we have to do to provide more value? And her employer was like, well, you would need to do XYZ. You need to help us increase the revenue by this. And she was like, great, I think I can do that. And they were kind of like, ah, ha, ha. But she's like, will you put it in writing that if I help increase the revenue of the company by XYZ and we can directly trace it back to me and my results, will you pay me this amount? And they were like, yeah, of course. So I'm just going to use imaginary numbers, but let's imagine she was able to help the company increase their revenue by $25 million. Would you pay me $1 million to do that if it didn't cost you anything extra in resources or anything like that? If we just did this and I earned an extra million because of it, or would you pay me an extra million because of and they were like, yeah, of course. Like, what employer is not going to be like, I want to make more money? Like, what business out there is like, you know what? No, let's just keep on the level where every business, cash is oxygen to a business. So we went to the employer and said, here's a plan. If it works, you pay me $1 million. If it doesn't work, you just keep paying me what you're paying me and you'll get the same results we've always got. And they were like, deal. And so we had to figure out a way to be indispensable to that organization. And we did. And then we had to work on mastering our integrity. So this goes back to something else that, we were sort of talking about earlier. I'm going to say this in a really kind way because she's not like this at all now. Like, this does not describe her at all. She went through a massive transformation when it came to this, but she was a little flaky. Y'all have that friend who's like, you're supposed to meet at 8 o'clock and at 7:45 when you're on your way there, they text you and go, I don't think I'm going to come today. Or they make plans with you and then they, bail, or they say they're going to do something and they don't. And we've all been like, I think this was my entire 19 to 24. I was the biggest frosted flake that there was. Like, I would be like, yeah, sure, that sounds like a good idea. And then the day would come and it was not a good idea anymore. And I didn't feel like doing it. And so I would flake on people all the time. So this piece about mastering integrity is we had to turn her word into gold. And interestingly enough, when your word is gold, you make more gold. So that's cool because financial integrity is so related to personal integrity. So if you relate, tell me that you relate in the chat box. If you need to work on your integrity, be honest and admit it in the chat box. Be like, this is something that I need to work on because I'd love to hear about it. And then we did a 10% more strategy. So we spent time every week increasing her productivity by only 10%, and productivity across all kinds of ways. Productivity when it comes to relationships, productivity when it comes to the care of her yard, productivity when it comes to anything. And then the last thing is we did track and measure absolutely everything that she did, because if we don't track and measure it, we can't tell if what we're doing is working. And so if we have a really big goal, like we want to get to 7 figures, we have to track and measure. And I see so many people in the Facebook group, even just this week, somebody's like, I don't know, I don't know if this is working for me. I don't know what to do about this. Help me with my retirement. And I'm always like, okay, tell me what you're doing for budgeting. And they're like, actually, I'm not budgeting. And I'm like, F off then. I'm not even gonna help you. I cannot, don't even come at me with, I'm not budgeting and I'm not doing my net worth, but how am I going to make $1 million? Don't even come at me with, how am I going to pay off my debt if you're not doing a budget net worth? Don't even go back to square one. Come to me later. Once you've done your budget, it doesn't have to be perfect, but once you've done that and you've done your net worth, now I got something I can help you with. But prior to that, if you're not going to track and you're not going to measure, forget it. Log off. Don't even bother. Don't waste anybody's time, especially your own. Okay. So we also had to look for her at what is wealth. She really believed that wealth meant spending. She looked at the Kardashians and she was like, well, this is wealthy. It means this designer handbag, this whatever. That's what she thought wealth was. So we had to look at what wealth truly is like. And I had to teach her that it's possible to earn $1 million a year and be totally broke. And it's possible to earn $40,000 a year and be completely financially free. So we had to create a distinction for her between consumerism and freedom. So what I want to know for you is, how would you define wealth? What does wealth mean to you? And I would ask Carrie, but she had to zip off for just a quick second to deal with something. So tell me, how would you define wealth in the chat box? I also recommend this book if you're looking for a book, The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. But how you define wealth is going to help you determine what you need to do in order to create it. And most people don't even think about what wealth actually is. They just know that they don't want to be where they're at now. That's their definition. But if we don't look at like, what does it actually mean to you, we're not going to get anywhere. So let me just have a peek here. Jackie says the freedom to do what I want to do. So time freedom. Cynthia says financial freedom. All New Again says freedom to say yes. Melody says having freedom to make decisions about my life. Lisa says having choices. M. Morris says being able to travel with my kids without financial insecurity. Trisha says freedom and autonomy with my time and schedule. Crystal says freedom and security. Okay, so freedom and security. Here's what's interesting. Freedom and security are in conflict with each other. This is just a fun little tidbit for you. I'm also super amused because as I'm looking at this list of people who are attending this YouTube live, I can count 3 millionaires in the chat right now too. So there's lots of you that have hit this, but what I love is you still come back to learn all the time. There's not a point where you arrive. You're still coming back to learn. So I just want to honor you for doing that. So freedom almost means the opposite of security, right? Freedom sort of means like, the ability to be unchained, and security sort of is like feeling chained. And so I just want you to be really clear in your mind. Do you want freedom or do you want security? They're different things. And I want you to be really specific. Miss Olive says, always having a couple thousand in the bank, a stockpile of cash, no debt unless it's investment debt, a couple trips a year. Okay, this is good. She's being very, very specific. Miss Olive, 10 points for you. High fives for you. Be very specific when you're defining wealth. Okay. That's my little tip for you today. So when we looked at where she wanted to go, she kept saying, well, I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a millionaire. And I was like, okay, honey, you don't even have $100,000 yet. So we got to build this step by step. Now, what's cool is if you have $20 in the bank, you're well on your way to being a millionaire. You only need $999,980 is all you need. That's all you're missing. But you're at least on your way. And so it's really important to create milestones as you go so that you can stop and celebrate. And what you'll notice is the closer you get, the faster the velocity of money or the faster it accelerates. So your first $50,000 takes a long time to get in some cases. Your first 100,000 can take a long time. But once you start to build momentum and gain momentum, the way compound interest works is you're going to start to see the velocity of that happen faster and faster. So set those benchmarks along the way. Okay, we had some things to undo, okay, in her life. Once we had defined what wealth was for her, we had a clear vision, okay? And we had to remove her need to impress people. We had to remove her need to feed her ego. We had to figure out what would make her joyful. Like, what does life look like for her at that level? So we had to get very specific. And those of you that have done Transformation Weekend with me, you know that we create a very, very clear vision at Transformation Weekend about how you're going to accomplish this. Okay, that becomes very important. So when you understand the day in the life, that's the exercise we do at Transformation Weekend. You can start breaking down the cost of that day, which then gives you a target to shoot for. Okay. So basically that exercise is you're going to sit down and you're going to imagine when I'm living the life that I want, when, as Olive was saying earlier, like I've got a couple thousand in the bank and this, what does it look like when I wake up and what time will I wake up and what am I going to eat that day? And what am I going to nourish my body with all day long? And who am I spending time with? When you can get really, really clear with that, we can go, okay, now what does that cost? Like, okay, I need some dog food. I need some, all these different kinds of things. You can kind of create a bit of a retirement budget. And now you know where your target is. And that target then forms the goals within the budget and the net worth. So that tells us really what we have to do. But at the same time, as we have to do things, we also have to undo things. Because when you live like a broke person, you have to undo broke habits. Okay, which then means you have to undo broke thoughts, which I know a lot of you have. So out of curiosity, tell me in the chat box, what are some broke habits you have? And don't take offense to the word broke. There's nothing offensive there about it. It's just a word. Don't give it any meaning. What are some broke habits that you have? And then what are some thoughts that lead to those habits? Okay, go ahead and share that with me. Buying on payment. Amanda, great answer. Buying on payment plans. Acting like I can never create more income, spending hours on video games, looking at my credit card, thinking that the room on the card means I can spend more. Crystal, that is such a great, honest answer. Choosing the cheapest thing on the menu, even if it's not what I want. Ooh, good answer. Not budgeting, using credit cards, scrolling Facebook. These are great answers. Shopping to fill an emotional need, regardless of if it's planned for or not. These are great. So when you can be honest with yourself, viciously honest, and you're like, okay, these are my broke habits. Now we can look at them and go, if I just stop doing these, or even if I just limit them for a season, like let's say for the next 6 months, I don't do these things, what will life look like? And maybe that's like where you start. Okay. That might be like a great place for you to start right now. So when we got to work with her, we got down to it. Telling everyone everything was a sign of insecurity for her. And she justified that by saying, oh, I just like to collaborate and connect. But you'll notice really wealthy people don't have time to just sit around and collaborate and connect. They're not spending 2 hours on a phone call with somebody just for no reason. Like there's a purpose behind everything. And it's not that you're not important or not valued, but they're intentional with who they connect with and why. And you'll hear us talk a lot in the Get the Hell Out of Debt program about the people you surround yourself with. And it's very important that as you're going through any transformation, you surround yourself with people who are doing the thing that you want to do. Now, this doesn't mean social climbing or like, you know, hanging around rich people because they're rich. It's got nothing to do with that. It has to do with who you become as a result of hanging around people that have a higher standard than you do today. I'm going to say that again. It matters that you hang around people who have a higher standard than you do today if you want to change anything in your life. It wouldn't make sense for you if you were on a fitness journey and you were training for a marathon to hang around your friends that are eating pizzas and margaritas every day. It wouldn't be a good lifestyle choice for you because inevitably you'd end up with a face full of pizza and margarita. So it's important to be really discerning about what you want and what standards those require and who around you has those same standards, and then not collaborating or connecting with people that don't have those same standards or aren't quite aligned as you, okay? Gossip, I put this in here also because she had admitted that one of her weaknesses was gossip, and she loved, like, she would call one person to get the scoop, and then she'd call the next person to get the scoop, and then she called the next person to see what they said. And it was like creating a lot of drama in her life. And drama, like drama definitely, but gossip for sure is almost always a sign of financial weakness. And I know that that's really ugly to say. This is why I don't teach this stuff publicly. When we got on here and Carrie was like, she never teaches this. You know why? Because somebody's going to take a clip of me saying gossip is a sign of financial weakness. And then a bunch of people are going to be offended. And then they're going to, you know what I mean? I'm going to be canceled, but I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you the truth. Okay. So if there's one thing you could change, it's this. Wealthy people discern. Let's go back and talk about that I had mentioned before. So wealth is powerful, but not because of the dollars in your bank account. It's because of the self-control that you master. Discretion is acting on one's own authority. So you don't have authority if you're an oversharer. Discernment is being able to judge other people's psychological, moral, or ethical compass well. Now, it's not being judgmental of them. There's a big difference. You can let people be who they want to be. What you're judging is not like, you know, if they're a good person or bad person. You're judging whether or not they can be trusted with your sacred dreams. That's where the discernment comes in, okay? And it always comes from listening and observing. Let people be who they are, okay? So don't judge them. We don't want to have a heart full of judgment. That's a really ugly way to live. But just be discerning. That's the big difference, okay? So put, I will not judge, but I will discern in the chat box. And if you have to write that in your journal 10 times today, like you're on the opening credits of The Simpsons, then do that. I will not judge, but I will discern. Write that down. Okay, the next thing we had to work on for her was privacy. So every human has a right to determine for themselves when their personal information is handled by others. So protecting privacy is important, obviously, for human dignity, safety, and self-determination. If we're giving away parts of ourselves that other people haven't earned the right to access, then we're putting ourselves in harm's way. It's why we don't want you to put your kids' details all over the internet. Like, it's that time of year, it's back to school right now. Friends on Facebook, everywhere, I see like Bennett, grade 4, St. Francis School. Oh, look at that. I made fireworks like this is a good thing, but this is a bad thing. So this is Bennett's holding a sign and he says, you know, I go to St. Francis Elementary School. My teacher's name is Mrs. Smith, and I like apples and Minecraft. Guess what predators now know where your kid goes to school? Do you know what I mean? And they know his last name because it's probably the same as yours on Facebook. Like, we have to be really mindful of who we're giving our information to and why. And when we are not acting with a sense of privacy, we're implying that we don't trust ourselves. It means that we trust other people more than we trust ourselves. And so you wouldn't invest with a business partner that you can't trust. So how can your wealth grow in an environment where you don't prioritize privacy? So I just want to leave that with you, okay? Important to know. In the area of indispensable service, which I talked about, okay, we made her indispensable to the company. We made her the top producer. We made sure she delivered more than anybody else. She worked harder. Now, by working harder, I don't mean like grinded it out necessarily, but for a short season, did more than was expected, okay? And this is true for you also. If you can bring your employer more profit and more sales than anyone else, you basically secure. It's the only real job security. And again, it matters more than anything else because oxygen is money to the business. And I know that you might think to yourself, well, my job is answering phones at the business. If you can figure out a way to answer those phones in such a way that it drives profit, you're going to win. It could be the way you answer the phone. It could be going above and beyond. It could be the way you sound when you're answering the phone. It could be the way you ask for a referral or a testimonial when you answer the phone. Anything you can do to go above and beyond is going to help you secure your job. And driving revenue for the business is the success secret. Okay, that's important to know. So for her, we worked backwards to determine, again, I told you this already, what the company needed in order to pay her. And we figured out after we got that, how we could reasonably achieve those targets. And we put a plan in place for that. So how many phone calls did she need to make? How many, sales calls did she need to do? Like, what were the things once we knew what the target was, what was her batting average essentially? And then how were we going to execute that in the most efficient and cash producing way? Then we tracked everything. We trained like an athlete. We treated her finances like she was training for the Olympics. We tracked and we measured and we studied and we improved and we tracked and measured and studied and improved. And we only ever tweaked one thing at a time. This is important to hear because I think sometimes people look at this and you might have already written down 6 things today already that you want to change. But I'm telling you, change one, track it, and measure it. Because if you change 7 things, you tweak 7 things, and you hit a stagnant point, we don't know what you're doing or not doing that's working. So we know for sure you need to be budgeting and doing your net worth. I don't know how many times you want me to say that today, but I'll say it over and over again if you want. In fact, one time I'll just do a live call and I'll just over and over, it'll just be me repeating, do your budget, do your net worth, do your budget, do your net worth. But what you want to make sure is that when you make a change and you track the success of that one change. You track, measure, tweak, okay? Over and over again. Implementing what she taught was really important. So all this stuff here, you might say, well, how do I quit gossiping? Is you do your best to try. And then if she'd catch herself, she'd stop and she'd say, you know what? I need to apologize for that. That was over the line. That was inappropriate behavior. I need to correct that. I'm very sorry. And she would undo or redo or clean up or tie a bow around any mistakes she was making so that she could catch herself in them in the future. And eventually she became the type of person who didn't gossip. And I tested her on it one day. I tested her and she didn't fall for it. I made something up, so it wasn't real gossip, but she didn't fall for it. She was like, I'm not doing this. And I was like, you, and high five. It was so great. It was really great. And we increased the velocity of business, meaning we churned customers more often and faster. So procrastination is one of the big keys in keeping a business stagnant. If you want to increase the speed at which your business grows, increase the speed of decisions you're making. Make decisions faster and sooner and take action faster and sooner. So we had to do that also. As far as integrity goes, we cleaned up any integrity issues. And again, when I say this, there's nothing wrong with her. She's amazing. She was like gorgeous, funny, smart, superstar, like phenomenal human, and struggled with integrity as we all do. Okay. So this is not like there's nothing wrong with you if you struggle with integrity. We all struggle with integrity. Life makes it really easy to not be integrous. Okay. But we would practice saying all the time, like, oh my gosh, your mouth is writing checks that your body can't cash. We would say that all the time. So we had to do things that she didn't always feel like doing. And so we had to keep promises first and foremost. all the time to herself before anyone else. So it meant if she said that her family was her number one priority and then a work thing happened, in the past, she would blow off her family and do the work thing. But we had to increase her integrity and stop being a flake and a bunch of other things and do the thing that she said was most important and make sure that it was actually prioritized. She had to practice making promises to herself. And then she had to take imperfect action towards them. So in the past, she'd always procrastinate if something wasn't done perfectly. She didn't want to do it at all. And so we had to practice taking imperfect action in spite of it. Look at my hair today. See my hair? My hair is an example of imperfect action. I had no time today. I ran out of time. You got the anal bead earrings, this haircut. This is what you got. Imperfect action. But the important thing is we're making motion toward, okay? That's what you got. You got to let go of what other people think, and you have to let go of something not being quite the way you'd want it to be in order to get the results you want to get. And we had to stop giving a flying floof of what broke people think. She had a lot of friends that were struggling financially also, people who were also very credit card dependent and all of that. And she cared what they thought. She cared what she wore. She cared what her face and her hair looked like. And she cared about what they thought of things. And she had to let that go in order to reach a new level of wealth. The 10% strategy that we did with her was every week, we did it on Sundays. She would sit down and say, how can I give 10% more to my relationships this week? So if on average she would call 5 different friends to check in with them in the week, she would make a 6th call, or maybe she'd call her mother. 10% more to gratitude. She created a practice where not only was she grateful the first thing when she woke up, which was something she was already doing, she implemented a practice that before bed, she would also take a moment to just think about what she was grateful for that happened in the day. 10% more to her wealth. So she would look at her numbers and then go, how can I put 10% more into my Roth IRA? So she would do that. 10% more to my colleagues and team. How can I show up better? So for her in the beginning, she was always sliding in late to meetings. You know how there's somebody, I know you know somebody, and maybe you are that somebody if you don't know somebody. Maybe you are this person that slides into a meeting late, but you have like an iced latte that's fresh. So like everybody knows that you're late because you were in the drive-through line. You know what I mean? Like, and just like blatant disregard for everybody else. So her 10% was like, I am going to be at least 2 minutes early for every meeting this month, no matter what. So she would like, that was one way that she could give more to her colleagues and started to change their perception of her. So you can fill in the blank. 10% more. If you give 10% more to something this week, what would change for you? Go ahead and tell me in the chat box. We would track and measure these 4 things every Sunday. So obviously her net worth, obviously her budget. I know you're all doing that. There's no reason any of you would not be doing that. And then her goals, we called them promises. They were self-promises. And then she did a manifestation identity training technique every Sunday as well. And so this formed part of her weekly practice, and we had to make it really fun for her. Those of you that do time management, this would also be a great time for you to do, planning your week, like putting in the things that are most important to you and making sure that your week is set up for success, right? This would be a really great time for you to do that also. And her entire timeline from brokish to 7 figures in net worth was 2 years and 9 months. And I'm telling you, she implemented everything. When I say trained like an athlete, she trained like an athlete. She started with 60,000 in student loans, 19,000 in credit card debt, had a very fluctuating income, was kind of all over the place. Still to this day, earning enough money to sustain and put a lot of money away for assets and environments. So you can give it up for her. Like, let's cheer on another woman who like hit the 7-figure mark. She's doing really great. Okay, so here's what I want to know for you, okay? The version of you that got you here today, the version of you that got you this net worth, can't take you to the next level. Something has to change. We got to tweak something, okay? She was in her late 20s, Emma. Emma's asking, how old was she? She was in her late 20s. In what categories that we've looked at, like of all those categories that we talked about, what does the current version of you that got you here lack? You get to write that in the chat box. Just be honest with yourself. What is the current version of you, the version that got you here? What are you lacking right now out of those things we've talked about so far? There might be something in there that you're like, I could tweak that. And in what ways can you increase the percentage that you show up? I already see you starting to type some of that out. That's really great. What can you commit to this week? What's something that you could implement this week? Maybe it's the no gossiping. Maybe it's the I'm not going to be late for something. I'm not going to promise somebody I'm going to do something when deep down I know when that day comes, I'm not going to want to do it. Like helping people move, right? Like we all say, sure, I'll help you. And then the day comes, we're like, I don't want to do this, right? So let's just say no upfront, right? And then the new identity or the new version of you, the 2 comma version of you, how does that version of you manage integrity, privacy, tracking, measuring, training, discernment, and more? Kayla says, getting up early. That's great. Great. Commitment to self, trusting myself, better sleep hygiene, no unbudgeted purchases. This is great. Okay. So as long as you're being really truthful with yourself, you're going to uncover something. And again, it doesn't have to be big. Remember, we only have to change one thing. You can come back and watch this replay and change one more thing later. Okay. But I'm going to take you on to the next woman, the next case study. If you have any questions, of course, you can type them in the chat. I might not see them all now. I'll get to them when I get to them. Carrie was going to read them out to me, but she's had a bit of a situation, so she's had to bolt. But and she might not be back. So I will, if I don't get your questions here, I will read the chat later and I'll answer them for you. Okay. So the second person, she she would always say that she just wanted enough to be happy, but yet she struggled financially. And so she came to me out of a conversation and she just said, like, I'm just wondering, like, is it possible to have like a wealthy life? She's like, I don't need a lot though. I just need enough. And I was like, okay, well, you're already telling me that you want to be broke. That's what you told me. You're giving me 2 different mixed messages, which means you're giving mixed messages to the universe. And so we have to be really, really clear about what you want. She always did the bare minimum. And I'm just saying this because if this resonates with any of you, you're like, some of you might be like, oh yeah, that's me. And sometimes it's like a product of there's just too much to do. And so sometimes we have to just do the bare minimum if we want to get things done, right? But it's really important to recognize doing the bare minimum versus doing what you're fully capable of or your full potential. So this I just want enough showed up in her relationships and her health and her finances. And she told me that in school, her parents expected her to get on the honor roll, which in her school was 80% average. And she knew if she applied herself, she could get like perfect grades or near perfect grades. But why bother? If I just have to get on the honor roll, I'm just going to get like 80 or 81%. So if that resonates, tell me in the chat box. I know a lot of high performing women who say that this was true for them when they were in school. And so her plan of attack was a little bit different, obviously. So we had to get her practiced at getting uncomfortable because for her, just doing the bare minimum, what was like just barely expected of her, that was comfortable for her. She'd push herself, but only so far. And so we needed to get to a new level of comfort and we had to practice taking risks. And so for her, if you've been in your comfort zone for a long time, I highly recommend this. And some of you have done this at Transformation Weekend, is you'll do like things that you just wouldn't normally do. Like you'll be like, okay, what's a skill I have to learn? Like maybe you're going to learn to skateboard, or maybe you're going to go zip lining with the kids, or maybe you're going to dive off the dock in the lake if you would normally be the type of parent to sit and watch the kids play. Anything that you can do that gets you outside your comfort zone expands your capacity for wealth. And I know you might be like, Erin, I don't get what ziplining has to do with making $1 million. I'm telling you, it's so related. Most of us, as we get older, our lives shrink and get smaller. We get to be the type of people who are standing on our lawn, yelling at kids, get off my lawn, whereas when we were young and free, we were like running through people's sprinklers in the neighborhood. And there's such a divide there. And what we want to do instead of live a life that gets smaller and smaller and smaller is we want to live a life that expands and gets bigger and creates more opportunity. And so to do that, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay. So you can do this in a very small way. It doesn't have to be big. We also had to use people pleasing to our advantage. She would often, because she would only do the bare minimum, she would do the bare minimum in order to get the approval from someone else. So she'd get the honor roll to please her parents or to please her teachers. She didn't really care one way or another. But because she had built up a life of people pleasing, we decided to use that to her advantage, meaning I sort of convinced her to do things that would please me, even though I knew it was in her best interest. And then we slowly shifted from her pleasing someone else to her pleasing herself. But we had to, it couldn't be like a massive jump. We had to do it slowly. So I would say things. And if you have a friend in here that's like, oh, I need this help, this is how you would have an accountability buddy in this case. Is you might say, let's see, Jenny and Jackie, if they were accountability buddies, they might say something like, Jenny, I'm going to need you to come up with another $500 out of your budget. This you're gonna have to sell some stuff. You're gonna have to get really creative. And because she wants to please her, she's gonna go, okay, I'm gonna do it because I told you I was gonna do it. That's how you use accountability. If you just generally say to someone, I want you to be my accountability buddy, I guarantee you, you've got yourself an enabling partner, not an accountability buddy, and they're going to derail you. But if you are a people pleaser, you can do this temporarily in order to get yourself to do things because you want that pat on the back from someone else. Now, we'll train that out of you eventually, but we had to use this to our advantage to start. And if you are somebody like this, you could find like a money mentor or somebody and even just telling them, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Check in with me in 3 months. Send me an email in 3 months to see if I did it. And that's going to drive you to do the thing. Then I would tell you to go ahead and do that. So we had to increase her contributions, her wealth contributions by 10% every month. So month over month over month, we did this to rapidly expand her wealth. And I'm going to show you how simple this actually is and how when you give yourself a big enough timeline, this actually ends up being big money in the long run. We had to heal the past. So we wrote a lot of letters and talked to her younger self. I'm not a therapist, but she would do a lot of these exercises on her own and then come back and report on them. And they were there to help her process. And I'll show you that in a minute. We got strategic with her work expenses. So she, even though she was a salaried employee, she would sometimes have to buy work expenses on her credit card and then get those reimbursed. And so we did no credit card spending outside, like no personal credit card spending. We removed credit from her life for a year. And she had to work with cash and do things from a cash standpoint for a while, just to, I don't know why people think they can do this. They can pay off debt and use credit at the same time. I don't know why. I always say it's like brushing your teeth and eating Oreos at the same time. You're just moving stuff around. You're not actually cleaning. Okay. But we got strategic because she had work expenses. We got a separate credit card just for work expenses. We aligned it with her favorite brands as far as hotels and all that, and we did the double points and triple points. And we did all that. Now we would never do that for personal consumption. We never borrow for liabilities, right? So we would never borrow for personal consumption. I do not believe that doing this, with your groceries and gas and all of that has any advantage, because we know that when you're doing it on a personal level, you're spending up to 24% more than you would if you were using a debit card. So we don't do it, okay? But we were strategic with work expenses, okay? And so we did no spending outside of that. That was just a little side note. She had a lot of work expenses. And then we tracked and measured everything. That's a common theme here, right? Track and measure. We had weekly targets that she had to hit. So she was so focused on having enough, I just want enough, that she would unconsciously reject anything abundant. Anybody relate? Anybody get a compliment and you immediately shut it down? She would reject anything abundant. She had both a worthiness and a guilt block. And those of you that have read the book, Naked Money Meetings, there it is. You know about these blocks and how they work and how they control us. And so she felt that deep down, she should only take what's hers and nothing more. And that makes sense because she was raised in a large family where even food was scarce. And so she was taught that taking anything more than her share was greedy. So you can see how this block would have formed. And she feared being seen, and she would only ever do just enough to get by. So a 30-minute workout would be exactly 30 minutes. She would never like do 32 minutes. You know what I mean? A passing grade of 70 meant she would do what it takes to pass and get 70. Passing, like not in school, not on the honor roll, but like if you had to take an online first aid exam, for example, to get it, she would get 70%, whatever the passing grade was, if it was a pass-fail situation. She never tested her own potential. And it's because she had this huge fear of both success and failure. And she also didn't have any wealthy role models in her life. So she didn't really know what was possible. And I think that that's important. It's very rare that we have wealthy role models, but it's probably more common that you actually do have wealthy role models. You just don't know they're wealthy because they don't look wealthy. That's probably more accurate. Okay. So for her, in order to build her base and work her way up, we started with what was enough. So for her, it was food. As long as I have food, clothing, shelter, and transportation covered, I'm going to be fine. And I was like, okay, well, that's all you're ever going to have then. Because, right? You see where I'm going with this. I wanted to work on increasing her retirement. She had about 80,000, if I remember, in retirement. And we wanted that to grow. And she had that from working many, 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 many years. So she participated in the company retirement plan, but wasn't investing it properly. So it was mostly just sitting there, like maybe earning 4%. And it was awful when she realized later, like what it could have been doing. We wanted her to also have some joyful experiences because she wasn't having those, and freedom, financial freedom. And then we also wanted her to give, because I explained to her what she was doing by just having enough was very selfish. I'm just pausing for you to take that in. I know it's ugly. So why I don't teach this? I can't teach this publicly. I will be canceled. Okay. I'll explain that. So when you say, I just want to have enough, it presupposes that you don't have enough already. So it puts you in a perpetual state of wanting or lack. It also means that opportunities to give to others, which truly giving is the real meaning of life, those opportunities pass you by because if you only ever have enough, you don't have abundance to share. And that makes it all about you. And that makes you a selfish arsehole. Saying that you just want to have enough is selfish. Okay. And I know that's not your intention. That's why I've written, yuck. I know it's not your intention. I know that's not your heart. But it comes from this place of you feeling like you don't deserve. And what's true is everybody deserves. If you looked at somebody else who was experiencing lack, you would want to help them because you believe they deserve it. So you have to get into posture or a position of abundance so that you can help. Okay. Did I blow your mind? Tell me. Jenny says, oof, in the chat. Oh, so does Hannah. Everybody's oof. Okay, I got you, right? You see what I mean? It's important to, and here's what I used to say all the time, is that if you're not out there building wealth, because we live in a capitalist society, whether you agree with capitalism or not, I don't care. This is not a political conversation at all. If you're not out there building wealth, and I know I recognize almost every name in this chat box, you are all phenomenal women who are amazing and who are giving and who are incredible. And if you don't go after this money, some guy, some CEO of some company is making all this money and he's using it for hookers and blow. So you better get out there and get your piece so that we can make some actual change in this world. I think it's really important. Okay. I'll say that over. And not that there's anything wrong with sex workers. That wasn't like a knock at sex. I just like to say hookers and blow because it's a shocking statement and it makes everybody laugh. Okay. It's probably yet again why I will be canceled. That's why this recording is not going anywhere except for you guys. Okay. So, in her retirement plan, she had target date funds, and that was it. So she'd set that up with her company's retirement plan, and she had target date funds. And those are brilliant for getting you started when you don't have a lot of financial literacy and you want a done for you solution. So basically, what those are is they're funds that are targeted to give you a certain return by a certain date, which is usually the date of your retirement. Okay. So we had to set a few asset allocation goals, and we had to make that happen. And she was making her investments just fine. So that money was coming out of her account. But then she'd blow the rest of her paycheck because she wasn't planning and she wasn't doing any sort of budgeting or cash flow planning. So we created a really aggressive investment plan. And once we looked at her spending, she determined, I didn't tell her, because again, it's not up to me, it's up to you. You're going to determine your own expenses. She realized she was blowing $3,040 a month. And she was like, I don't need to blow that much money. So we took 2040 off the top and started investing that right away. And interestingly, the other $1,000 she would often invest too. But in the beginning, I didn't want everything to feel too tight. Okay. I wanted her to feel like she had some breathing room. Okay. So here's what we did when we got to work. We started to acquire different assets. So she had some equity in her property, but it wasn't really where she wanted to live. It wasn't her dream home or any of that. And I would say this is true for many of you. Many of you have settled for a home that you like, but if you were to really consider what is your dream home, it's not the home you're in now. And which is okay. It's okay, but don't get attached to this home. See it as simply an asset or a liability. Okay. Don't get emotionally. I know we all like, oh, but my baby took her first steps in this living room. I'm like, do you want to be rich and have your grandbabies take their steps in a beautiful palace that provides, that's paid for with passive income, that also provides jobs and money for charity, maybe you want that. I don't know. I don't know what you're open to. But rather than sell that property and lose some of the equity to real estate fees and mortgage penalties, we ran all the numbers and she rented it out and it cash flowed an extra $400 a month, which then she also used to invest. She purchased a new home with a small down payment because she lived in it and it had a rental suite in it. And that covered just over half the new mortgage payment, which decreased her monthly housing costs by 55%. I don't think I've ever talked this much all at once. Let me just drink some more water. I feel hang on, let's see. You know what? It just gets like really dry back there. Okay. If my husband were here, he'd say, I know what'll fit. Anyway. Okay. Other assets that I believe she needed. I created this like to-do list for her. I said, here's your shopping list. Okay. So here's what you're going to go buy when it comes to assets. You need an exchange traded fund. And this is the one, if you've listened to Get the Hell Out of Debt, when you hit phase 3, I tell you, you better get these exchange traded funds that mirror the S&P 500. You also need to buy a NASDAQ fund, but look for low fees when buying index fund. NASDAQ's kind of like another index. And I'll go into all of these, of course, in Get the Hell Out of Debt. I know most of you are all members or whatever. So there you go. But I like them both because they are similar, but they do different things. And then the next thing is I wanted her to buy one long-term stock purchase. And she was like, why? I'm like, because really the reason is because I wanted her to practice. But people have this weird thing when they're like, I want to buy stocks, but I don't know how. So then they don't ever do it. But if you knew how easy it was, those of you that attended summer money camp, shout out to you. I can see some of you in here. You buy it and you're like, oh, it's no big deal. So guess what happens? Once you buy it and you have a good experience, you buy more and you buy more and you buy more and you learn and you buy more and you buy more. So we just had to get her to buy one. So I said, choose a company that you love, a big company that you support, that you believe in, and that you think is going to be around for a long time. We'll do a little bit of research. Don't go too crazy into you get overwhelmed if you get too crazy into it. But let's have a reasonable amount of awareness. And then we're going to purchase that stock and see what happens. Okay. But every week, because we're doing our net worth, we're going to watch it go up. We're going to see it go down. We're going to see it but we're going to learn that whole time. Then she also chose peer-to-peer lending through a platform to increase her risk tolerance and rate of return. So peer-to-peer lending is like if, let's say there were a bunch of people who couldn't qualify for loans the traditional way, but they had a good reason, like maybe they had a business or something went wrong in the past, like a divorce, and so their credit score was tanked. So they didn't qualify for a loan the traditional way, and they wanted to go outside a bank. You can, as an investor, lend those people money. So, but it'll tell you like this person's a D credit, meaning like they got like a 600 credit score. So they're not cream of the crop, but they got a 600 credit score. And here's the reason, like here's all basically the underwriting or the risk of why you would lend to them or why you wouldn't lend to them. And then you get to decide. And so the loan terms will say, listen, whatever you put in, you'll get 12%, which is like pretty decent, right? So you may be like, I'll gamble on this person. Or maybe you're like, nope, I don't want that person. But you'll take the person who has B credit and they just need the money short term to do a refinance on something. Like there could be something there, right? So peer-to-peer lending is a way that people can lend money to each other outside of the bank, okay? And hang on, I just got a bunch of notifications that Carrie would normally handle. I hope she's okay. I don't know either. I saw somebody say like, I hope she's okay. Carrie, we all love you and we hope you're okay. Yeah, anyway, I'm sure we'll all find out. And then of course we had a high yield savings account. So at the time that I was working with her, high yield savings accounts were only paying about 2%. But we put our emergency funds in there. So those of you that have your money in high interest savings accounts and you're like, this is the ticket, it's not, because as we see now, rates are coming down, which means like when lending rates come down, your rates in your high yield savings account are going to come down too. It's not a place to invest money. It's a place to keep money you haven't spent yet. It just does a little bit of compounding, nothing fancy, nothing major, but it's there. It's better than putting it in a bank that's going to take money out every month, like a bank fee of some kind, and dwindle what you put in there. But it's not a place to invest. Okay. So the 10% each month strategy worked like this. The first month, I just used January, February, March, but I can't remember what time of year we started this. But the first month we put in that $2,040 that I told you we grabbed out of her budget. And we just increased it by 10% in February. And that made her contributions to her investments 2244 in February. And then we increased another 10%. So we increased it by another $224 the next month. And then so in March, it was 2468. And then we just increased it another 10%. And we kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going until by the end of the year, she was putting away 5815 into retirement. That basically like that asset allocation list that I gave you. So, of the 5815, maybe 800 of it went to stock. Some of it went, she decided how she wanted to divide up those assets. But here's what's cool. That might look like a lot of money, but that happened by her finding $200 to $500 extra every month, which is between $6, like up here, it's $6 a day. Down here, it's $16 a day. If I said to you, your secret to being a multimillionaire is to come up with $16 a day, could you do it? I'll just wait. I'll just continue to drink my water while I wait for you to tell me the answer, which is yes, you could do it. But it had a massive, like if you look between January and December, she almost tripled her contributions. So Melody's asking, do you ever stop increasing by 10%? I mean, if you could keep going, why wouldn't you, right? Here's what happened for her in reality. And this will happen for you too. When you start to dial in your finances like this, more money started to come to her. And you can say amen in the chat box because I know this has happened for many of you. When you start to pay attention, more money comes to you. So she ended up getting 2 raises throughout this time, which increased her whatever, which made this like so much easier. And then she kept doing it again and kept doing it again. And I'm telling you, when you focus and you pay attention and you give, I think it's really important to say, if you're all like, you've got to also be giving this whole time. Like she was giving to a charity she believed in. When you're doing that over and over and over again, you are increasing the flow of cash into your life because you can be trusted with it. So I don't know, like eventually the strategy will change. Like she's buying all these other assets now and doing other things. So she doesn't need to focus so much on this monthly thing because she's going to probably retire pretty quick. So things will shift. But if you can keep increasing by 10% and it's not affecting your monthly cash flow, keep doing it. Like this wasn't being squeezed. Let me just go back. Sorry. This wasn't being squeezed out of her. Like she wasn't going without groceries or anything like that. This was her finding $6 to $16 a day. Those of you that are in the Get the Hell Out of Debt program and you know about the $10 challenge, we teach you like take $10 and turn it into 100. When we do that practice, like it's amazing what people can come up with. So some of you like sell sourdough bread on your local Facebook marketplace. There's your $16 a day, right? Like you can come up with this quite easily. We had to heal the pattern. Okay. So a lot of those blocks that we talked about before were formed in childhood. So we did a lot of work around understanding the perspective her parents had when it came to money and how they struggled to provide for all the kids. And they would have loved to have given each kid even more. And she came to understand really that the meaning that she wasn't worthy wasn't true. It was just, she had assigned that to herself because she didn't know how else, when you're a young child, you don't know how else to process things. So she knew that healing had to come from reparenting herself and from establishing her worth by making new choices and reinforcing the new patterns. So you can see even how doing this over and over and over again reinforced, I know what I'm doing financially. I've got this. I'm worth this. I deserve this. Like, look at the progress I'm making. And then, when she'd fall down or make a mistake, like it wasn't perfect the whole time and it wasn't perfect every month. Like some months it was a lot and some months it was slightly less, but that was sort of the target we went for, 10% a month on average. You could see how that would build her financial confidence in time. And it'll build yours when you do it too. So again, we tracked everything. We trained like an athlete, but we also celebrated like a gold medalist because she was somebody who wasn't used to celebrating. And so even when she'd learn something new or do something, she would think to herself, oh, I should have already known that a long time ago. But I was like, no, dog, let's celebrate that. This is incredible. Like, look at you go. Like, so we celebrated and celebrated and celebrated. And so those celebrations sometimes look like she'd take herself paddle boarding. She would get herself, treat herself to a manicure or something like that. Like we would do things that for her represented a celebration. So you'll have to do that stuff too. She started to keep a list of everything she was doing. So in the beginning, it was like she carried around this little notebook and she would like literally write down everything. So she would be like in line at I don't know, Dunkin'. I'm making this up, but she's in line at Dunkin' and she wants her caramel iced latte. And she she gets up to the front and she goes, you know what? I'm going to get a small instead of a medium. So she would write down, I made the decision to get a small iced caramel latte instead of a medium. Celebrate. She was like, look at me go. I still got what I wanted, but I made a good financial decision. Save myself 50 cents. And most people would be like, 50 cents, that's nothing. But if your goal is to save $6 a day, 50 cents, you're like well on your way, right? So those little decisions, people forget how they add up to like massive, massive wealth in the long run. Okay. So she treated it like a workout. And what was cool when she started to track all the little things, her workouts got better. She started to push herself. She started to like, train differently. So it's all aligned because as we all know, muscles are not built through ease. Muscles are built on the last 2 reps, the hardest reps. So that like pushing, that pushing, that pushing. Sometimes that means that your financial muscles are built on that 50 cents. We focused on strategy and also we focused on helping her focus. So we had to get rid of this all or nothing thinking, this black or white thinking, and we had to move into the gray. So she tracked everything. And even if she didn't think it was consequential, she tracked it anyway. And what that allowed her to do is over time start to see her patterns so she could do what the other girl did, which was tweak. And then initially it was like this huge jump to set up her life and get out of her comfort zone by making these little tweaks along the way. But she had to get over this feeling of guilt because she had ignored it for years, which of course she now regrets. So she was like, she did this huge thing and then we kind of like sort of got used to it. And then this guilt would creep in like, why didn't I do this a long time ago? So we had to really work on that of like, listen, you might not have started for another 10 years. Like, that old saying, like, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is today. You only have today. Like some of you are going to log off this call and you're going to put 50 cents over into your investment account. And we're going to celebrate that because that is a start. Like we have to start. That's the big deal. So her timeline was a little longer. She didn't have as big of an income jump, though she did have a couple of income jumps. She started with $80,000 in net worth. That was mostly in her retirement. She had credit card debt that revolved every month. So she was like using it and like paying it off, but maybe not always the whole amount. So she was kind of dealing with that. And she was just doing basic retirement contributions. And then 5 years and 8 months later, it was a 7-figure net worth. So we got to celebrate her. That was amazing, amazing progress. This will be you. Can you imagine like in a year, 2 years, I'm going to be like, let me tell you about Marima and Amanda and Lindsay and Jenny and Cheyenne. Like, let me tell you their story. I'd have to get your permission though. I did get all of their permission. So the version of you that got you here cannot take you there. We're going to review this again. In what categories that we've just looked at does the current version of you lack? Are you tracking? Are you, doing 10%? Are you pushing yourself to do a little bit more all the time? Tell me what you're lacking. And then tell me what you can commit to this week. What are you immediately going to implement or what are you immediately going to stop doing? And go ahead and tell me that. Okay, good job. Lindsay's going to do 10%. Okay, great. This is wonderful. Track and push 10% more. Good. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so I realize we've been on for an hour and 6 minutes. Are you guys okay to hang on for one more case study? Do you want to hear one more? Okay, all right. From chaos to calm. So this is one of my favorite clients. I mean, all my clients are my favorite clients. But I just love her so much because she is like a human tornado. And I identify also as a human tornado. So this was really, really fun for me working with her. It felt like such an honor that she called. And so for her, life felt really, really messy and really disorganized, financially speaking. And she always felt stupid as a result of her finances. Like she just felt like she couldn't get it together. Now, what's interesting is she was diagnosed late in life in her 40s with ADHD. And she would make a plan and then always deviate from it. She was so good at like coming up with the plan, but really sucked at sticking with the plan. And she had both hyperactivity with her ADHD and also sometimes like hyper focus. So she would kind of like vacillate between the two. And so she often was creating her own drama, but unintentionally, of course, right? Like nobody intends to be like, I'm going to wake up today and cause some drama in my own life. Like nobody wants to do that. She had a chaotic relationship, always on again, off again, with unavailable men or men who were really rigid. So this was interesting. This was like an interesting pattern for her, which helped me understand her money as well. And it appealed to her, these men that were like really rigid and like disciplined appealed to her because she thought she lacked discipline. So she'd be attracted to these men who were like really formal and rigid and like, usually had six packs and, you know, trucks, just like manly men, like that old stereotype, right? And, but what happened was her partners were often very disrespectful of her because they didn't understand her neurodiversity. Technically, neither did she for the longest time. But they would just look at her and like, while they found her really attractive in the beginning because she was like wild and free and like fun and creative, and eventually they'd all come to annoy each other because they were just like, well, just why can't you remember where your keys are? And she was like, because I can't remember where my keys are. And you know what I mean? Like it just was like, whatever. Anyway, every time she'd go through a breakup, especially if it was a cohabitation, she would lose like half her net worth. And so it felt like she was like in this really awful pattern of like starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping her finances. And if you can relate, type in the chat box. I started and stopped before, but I am not going to stop again. Type that in the chat box. Okay. Okay. So we had to come up with a plan of attack for her. Now, whenever I'm working with somebody who is not neurotypical, I believe that the best way to handle money in those situations is to work with your brain and with your psychology and not try and discipline this out of you. It's not going to work. It's going to just create frustration for you and it's going to make you feel stupid. And there's no reason you should feel stupid because you have a superpower, I'm sure, in another area of your life that nobody else has. So we really had to create a system that worked with her. And so sometimes that means trying one or two different systems on and seeing what works before we really know. Because it has to like feel good in your body too. And it has to be something that you're pulled towards, not something that you're like, oh, I got to do this thing and I don't want to do it. Money really has to be fun. Okay. Then we had to really get clear on the end game. We had to stay really consistent, which is hard, really difficult for her, but we had to leave room for shiny squirrels, meaning like if she wanted to go on a side quest, we had to leave room for that in the budget because that's going to happen. And rather than treat that like it was wrong or she needed to fix that, we had to embrace that part of her. We needed to remove credit from her life. It was too tempting of a quick fix. So we had to stop using credit. Now, neurotypical people have to stop using credit when you're getting out of debt. So it's not the end of the world. There are lots of other credit alternatives that you can do. But she kept the impulsivity that she had, kept her running into trouble with her credit cards. Okay. We had to create healthy relationships. So we had to spend time with healthy, whole people who have high standards, but who don't manipulate, control, or abuse. Because sometimes that would happen also. Like in these relationships, for whatever reason, it was just a pattern. And she got comfortable being treated a certain way because she also believed she was stupid or incapable or disorganized or undisciplined. And so she'd listen to that in other people and it felt familiar to her. So she'd engage in relationships like that. And if you've ever been in a toxic relationship, just in case she ends up watching this later, tell her in the chat box that you have too, because all of us, I think, no matter what your brain's doing or not doing, we've all had experience with some jerks in our lives, no matter what gender, no matter, and so it's something that we all have to learn. We're all learning all the time. And just because it happened to you in the past does not mean it's going to happen to you in the future. Okay. We also had to realize how she learned. And one of the only ways she learned, she was really good at auditory processing and she had some fitness goals also. So we use those two things together. We have it stacked, listening to audiobooks and doing exercise so that she could really create endorphins around her financial story. So she learned a lot through different audio modalities, so podcasts and books and that kind of a thing. Okay. And then also we tracked and measured and tracked and measured and tracked and measured. Now we did it a little bit differently with her than we would with other people, but it doesn't matter how you track. You can do it on paper. You can do it, you can get a tattoo every week if you want. You can do whatever you want, but you have to track and you have to measure because otherwise we can't get where we want to go. We had to build some self-trust. So because her neurodiversity made her feel disorganized, she often trusted other people too easily. And you can put relate in the chat box if that's also you. And she would do it especially if it looked on the outside like other people had their lives together. And so that made it easy for her to be preyed upon. So we had to learn to do small things with consistency so she could learn self-reliance. And we also had to stop making quick fixes like consolidation or like, anytime there was a big financial challenge, she would do something drastic to like try and change it and then end up right back where she was. So she had to get really, really, really clear on what was an asset and what was a liability. And as I said, we removed credit from her life. So we had to make sure she never ever borrowed for liability again. And it was honestly about a year before she got it. Like, I don't know how many times I have to say, this is an asset, this is a liability. It takes time for some people to really wrap their head around it, and that's okay. But there was a point I remember where suddenly it was like it all clicked for her. So if you're still in that space where all of this financial knowledge still feels like it's learning a new language and it's, you can kind of like donde Estebaño your way around, but you wouldn't be able to like have a conversation with somebody financially speaking, it's going to click. You just keep piling it in and immersing yourself and having conversations and doing it, like it will click eventually. And I remember for her, it was about a year and it was like it all just clicked. And what was cool about that is then everything became easier because she had a different, it wasn't like a learning, it was like a knowing that she had about money. Okay. So for her, we had to build her stack in this order. So we had to make sure we had an emergency fund, and then we had to have a blow buffer. We had fun with that term for any mistakes. So because she was impulsive and because she was learning how to temper all of that, it took a while. Like we had to build an extra emergency fund because there was just sometimes she would like whoopsie and then not have enough money for groceries. So we had to take care of all of that. We also had to create assets that she couldn't touch. One of the things that had happened in the past is when she would like have a little bit of, whether it be savings or investments of some kind, she'd run into problems with debt and she'd cash out the investments and pay off the debt. So we had to get into a place where she couldn't touch those assets. We also had to get her a trusted team of advisors. Now, not everybody needs a financial planner, but I believe that there are some people that do. You might not. But some people just do better knowing that they can hand their money over to someone else and have them handle it. However, I still made her be very, very involved. I don't want you handing it over and never looking at it. She knew what they were doing. She was involved in the decision makings, but she just felt for a season like it would help her bridge the gap between feeling stupid and feeling like she was actually doing something that was working for her. It helped her build her confidence. So we built a trusted team of advisors for her. We had to make it fun because she did love her shiny squirrels. And we had to create a reward system for her that was not based on like credit card points or any of that. We had to literally create her own reward system. So, if she maxed out her investment contributions for the month and had X amount of dollars left over, she could blow that money. If she, hit this certain target or this certain tier or got this raise or whatever, we would build in little rewards for her. So she was motivated to keep going. We had to retrain her brain, mostly how she thought about herself. But we worked with her healthcare provider on impulse control and mastering her emotion-driven behavior. It meant for a season she was on some medication, which really worked for her until it didn't. And then she worked with her provider. But by then it was interesting. This is not medical advice at all. But because we often do this work in tandem with health work, like we do a lot of walking and we do a lot of like, me, if you're in the Get the Hell Jet program, I want your sleep dialed in. I want your hydration dialed in. I want you moving your body. And because she started to do that over and over, her health started to improve, which she said made focus really easy. And she like cut out certain foods from her diet and did all kinds of things. And so eventually I don't know if she's on any medication now. I don't think so, but she weaned herself off of what she had been on previously. But when we started, we needed to deal with the impulse control. So she worked on financial literacy. So she felt empowered instead of stressed, which made money more fun. Obviously, when you feel like you know what you're talking about, it's more fun. If you want to talk to me about Love is Blind, I feel like I'm an expert on the show Love is Blind. So it's fun for me to talk about Love is Blind. If you want to talk to me about like a murder documentary, unless it's the Lacey Peterson one, but if you want to talk to me about like crime or murder, I'm clueless and I'm disinterested. So same with money. When you know more about money, it becomes more fun to talk about and to deal with. So for her, as I said, we created reward systems along the way. One of her big rewards was she wanted to take a trip to Greece. And so she did that. And it was so cool. She sent pictures from Greece and I felt like I was celebrating along with her. But that was her big goal when she hit her 7 figures. And we got her using only cash. And by cash, I don't mean like money out of her wallet. I mean debit card, like money that she actually had, not pretend money that she was going to pay back. We did that for the first 3 years. We were only going to do it for a year. And as she did it, she's like, you know what? I really like this and I don't want to go back into any bad habits. So we did not use credit for 3 years until her ability to regulate financially was under control. And then after that, we only got a card to increase her credit score because she did some investing, which I'll show you in a minute here. Okay. So her credit habits had previously been built around getting points, rewards, or other quick fixes. So she committed to stop using credit, as I said, for a year. And then after that year, she kept it up. She had to create her own reward system. I told you that already. I blew the slide a couple slides ago. Sorry, I yacked before we got here. She had never invested in the market before, so we got her investing in things she was excited about, and she trained herself to get excited about those purchases, which had a positive result on the net worth. I'm doing this with my daughter right now. So we just were in Florida. My daughter went to Ulta for the first time ever, had a blast. I'm telling you, when I was 16, we went to Riverside Value Drug Mart in my town. That's where we bought our makeup. I think our choices were Maybelline and CoverGirl. I think we had Revlon. That was it. I'm telling you, the money that I could put into it's a good thing she's cute because I'm telling you, if she was ugly and we had to make her cute, my Ulta purchases would be way too high. Anyway, I'm just kidding. So, but when we were there, I, of course, was like, did you know that Ulta trades on the stock market, the New York Stock Exchange? She was like, it does. So we went to Ulta and we did her little Ulta run. She got her lash serum or whatever it was. But when we got back to the hotel, we dug into Ulta and decided if it was a good buy for her or not. So I'm just saying, like, you have to get invested in purchases or companies buying investments that interest you. Okay, that matters. It really does make a big difference. And we use the mantra, I'm not a consumer, I'm an investor. Those of you that did summer money camp, you know, right? You type it in the chat box. We work on this a lot in summer money camp. I am not a consumer, I'm an investor. We change the way we see the world because we understand that when we are a consumer, we're being marketed to all the time. When we see ourselves as an investor, we put ourselves in the driver's seat when it comes to money. Okay. We had to slow down. We created automated systems for her retirement money. Sometimes when things were coming at her really fast, she often felt overwhelmed. So she'd either do nothing or she'd make a quick decision without looking into it. So we just set up some systems to automate. So because we didn't want her to make decisions intentionally in case she forgot them, we timed transfers to go out on her payday for different investments. And so for her budget, all that had to happen is we tracked only the variable expenses. So groceries, gas, that kind of a thing. So all the other money was going into other accounts, and we had a separate bank account, a checking account for her variable expenses like grocery, gas, whatever. So all she had to manage was, I think it was like $1,200 a month. She didn't have to manage the 5,000 or 6,000 or whatever it was she started with a month, because all of that would go in and go to all the mortgage payments and all the things she had to do directly. And because she stopped using credit for a season, she complained a lot. We laugh about it now. She whined, like straight up whined to me for a couple of months. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not backing down. Like, I don't know what plan you want to get on where I'm going to let you use credit while we do this, but it's not like, I don't know who you're going to talk to that's going to agree with that, but they're going to steal your money, because if you want real results, you got to stop doing it. So she eventually figured it out. And then, as I said, it took her a long time to go back because she really liked the results she was getting. She started to say how she really now got a sense of how much money she actually had. Because she was using credit, she was fooling herself as to, like, you know, like somebody had so bravely said in the chat earlier, sometimes I would look at my credit and see the available balance and think it was money. And that's by design. They want you to do that. And so she was really loving not using it because it really allowed her to be like, wait a second, like, how much do I actually have? She started to be more mindful about purchases before she was making them. She put a little, you know, she wasn't always perfect at it, but she would try and tell herself she had to wait 24 to 48 hours before actually. So she'd add things to cart and then like think about it or sleep on it. And then she would regularly check her budget to make decisions instead of checking the bank balance to make decisions. I was going to say that one more time. Wait, I'm going to dramatically drink my water and then I'm going to say that one more time. She would regularly check her budget to make decisions instead of checking the bank balance to make decisions. Anybody know why that's so powerful? It's powerful because sometimes when you check the bank balance, you don't realize there's something else that's still supposed to come out or that you haven't budgeted for. And so when you're not looking at the big picture, right? This happens in business. They always tell you in business, don't look at the bank balance, look at the receivables and the payables. Like look at the ledger. Don't look at the bank balance because it's so important that you're tracking the right thing. Okay. And so, yes, one is reconciling, not planning. Exactly. Check your budget, not your bank balance. Yes. Great. Look at you guys. You got it. You got it. You got it. You're getting it. So good. Okay. She also had too much stuff. So her impulsivity combined with the disorganization that she had been feeling previously, which is, I say this because now she doesn't feel disorganized anymore, even though her brain still works the same way. So it's funny how our thoughts convince us of a certain thing when it's not actually true. So her perception changed, therefore her world changed. So she was often buying the same things over and over and over again. I joke with Carrie about her 16 whisks that she has, right? Carrie uses hers actually for very specific purchases because Carrie is an amazing chef. But some of us have like a bunch of different things in our house that we only probably need one of. So she studied minimalism and it turned out that was a fit for her. She couldn't handle selling things one by one. It was too overwhelming for her. So she had a series of garage sales over 2 months where she would literally just put like everything like out onto the lawn and then like pull it all back in and then try again in a couple of months. So she did that to declutter and she created some rules around stuff in her home. So some of you heard the story. I think I told this on the podcast when we did the decluttering challenge. She had, I think it was 50 hangers. She bought 50 wooden hangers for her closet. And the rule was one item of clothing per hanger. And if she bought something new, she couldn't get more hangers. So she had to remove something from her. She had to pick. So if she was in the mall and she saw something she wanted that she hadn't budgeted for, but she had the money, she could buy it provided she got rid of something that was already in her closet. So that kind of system really worked for her. So that's why I mean when I say she created some rules around some stuff. She made sure to create systems that supported her neurodiversity. So we do this all the time. Is like, what can you slay once and for all? Like if you're constantly losing keys or phone chargers, like what is the solution for that? So for her, it was like keypads on everything, keypads on the front of the house, keypads, so she could go anywhere without her keys if she needed to, and putting phone chargers everywhere. Like every room had a phone charger in it and it had to stay in that room. So if the kids needed it, they didn't take it out of the wall. They could sit in whatever room, there'd be a phone charger there. That really helped. It saved her so much time looking for things and so much time cleaning. Yes, garbage can in every room. Genius. So great. So great. You guys are so great. Then we embraced it. So we didn't fight the neurodiversity. We gave it a warm hug and we didn't try and discipline anything. We just worked with it to create systems that supported her. And so because of the way her brain worked, we only did everything in short bursts. So normally, as if you're a client of mine, we have coaching calls that are between 45 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on, the package or whatever that you, and again, this is not a pitch. I don't even have any room for coaching clients right now. So there's not even available. So again, it's just not a pitch. But for her, we spent 10 minutes a day on the phone. That was it. I just didn't want her to feel overwhelmed. Or sometimes like you get too much information in one call and you have like this huge to-do list and then you do nothing. So we just worked it out that every day for 10 minutes, it ended up being about 15 by the time we said hello and visited and whatever. But 10 minutes of content every day is what we did instead of her trying to focus for a long period of time. And then we also tried to make sure everything else she did was in those short bursts. That seemed to work best with her brain. So she'd spend 10 minutes reconciling her budget and then walk away. And so she only ever had to do like things like in tiny, tiny, like little chunks. And then she hired a financial planner who met with her once a year. That was part of the team and connected her with an accountant and a bookkeeper. And all of us worked together. We were all on the phone together twice to help her build a system to build wealth while she slept. So I acted kind of as the coach that was helping her with the mindset and implementing and helping her understand when the accountant would use these big jargony words, what they meant and what they meant to her. And then we only required her input when a decision needed to be made. So all the decisions were still hers, but we put the systems together for her and that really helped her. Now she had a little bit of luck, okay? So when she started, she owned her own home and she had a bit of equity in it. So to increase her income, she took on 2 roommates in the basement. So that increased her income by $1,500 a month. And then in 2019, she took equity out of the property, not to pay off debt. Okay. No golden geese were harmed in this process, but she put it towards another home again with a suite. So she moved into that one initially she had 2 tenants in there. But in the pandemic, she moved into that one also and rented the entire first home out for $3,800 and the suite in the second home for $1,500. And so it created, like after expenses and all the things, it created about $1,840 in new total cash flow for her. So a little bit of luck. Okay. Both properties increased in value during the pandemic, which also gave her net worth a boost. Neither of them were the thing, though, that did it. All the other stuff that I told you before, but I just want to be transparent with you. So, like, sometimes the real estate market is helpful. She could not have predicted, though, that it would go up. So she was happy with the decision because it cash flowed. So I say all this because we would never make a purchasing decision. And those of you that have done any real estate investing or whatever with me, you know, we don't ever buy for appreciation. We don't ever buy hoping it's going to go up in value. We buy for cash flow. Okay, write that in the chat box. We don't buy real estate investments hoping that they're going to go up in value. We don't care if they go up in value or not. A little bit we care, but we don't make our decisions based on that. We buy real estate investments for cash flow. Okay. The appreciation, increase in the property value was the icing on the cake for her. Okay. It's important to know that. So I just want to point this out because some of you are going to be having your knickers in a twist over this. Okay. Listen, poopy pants, pay attention. If you're thinking to yourself, there's any part of your brain that's thinking, yeah, but she's lucky she could afford to own property. No, I can't afford to own property. It's so expensive to own property today. Her second property was purchased outside of the major metropolitan area where she lives, and she had to move to a less fun town. Those were her words, than her big city because she had a major financial goal. But she did it because the alternative was a life of excuses and struggle. And here's what you need to know. There is property somewhere in the world that you can afford. You just might have to change your assumptions and your attitude. There is property somewhere in the world that you can afford. So don't give me this BS about I can't afford a house. You might not be able to afford a house in San Diego, but maybe somewhere in Iowa or somewhere else. You know what I mean? If you do your research and you like, there's property somewhere, I guarantee that you can afford. Okay. So I just say that because sometimes we have to, if your real goal is wealth and your real goal is 2 commas, you might have to get in the property game at some point. Okay. Just saying. So with her also, we had to update net worth once a week. Surprise. Okay. And we had to check in with her bank account daily. So budgeting was a little more challenging for her. She found it easier to check in every day with her bank account and then update, sort of her budget that way. And this is how I do it too. I really believe in spending 10 minutes a day with your money. So you just go in and you just double check. Did everything do what it was supposed to do? Great. Happy, log out. Okay. We couldn't do this in the old day. We had to wait for that statement to come. Remember? Checkbooks and I'm going to date myself. You guys, I'm so old. Okay. I'm the same age as Lacey Peterson. Let me just go back to that. Okay. She had the financial planner create scenarios for her based on what kind of life she wanted in retirement. And then they worked backwards. So she knew how much to set aside. And then from there, anything extra she could manage to save, she invested it in stocks of companies that she loved and she tracked the growth. And all of that was in conjunction with her financial planner. She didn't have her financial planner do some and she did some over here and didn't tell him. Everything was the financial planner knew what she was doing and why. So I just think that's important to say because communication is critical. Now, this is the part that I'm going to get canceled for. You ready? If you have a house plant that isn't doing well, you can't keep watering it and hoping for the best. You have to remove it from the soil. How many of you ever had a house plant that was sick in your life? You can tell me in the chat box all your house plant challenges. When your houseplant is sick, you have to take it out of the soil. You got to shake all the soil off of the roots of that plant. And then you have to replant it in healthy soil, or the plant will not function. The plant will not live. And the plant will make other plants around it sick. The environment matters. And this is the same for you and relationships. If you're doing all this work around money and you're hanging around people who are unhealthy financially, you're going to have a heck of a time getting better. And so one of the hardest decisions we had to make was who she was spending time with. She was spending time with people who thought she was stupid and thought she was disorganized, and they let her believe that. So she continued to believe that, which meant she continued to act in that way. And it wasn't until she removed herself from those relationships for a season, she eventually decided not to go back to them, but she removed herself from them for a season. And later on, people were like, "What's different about you?" And I wanted to be like, Bish has $500,000 in assets. That's what's different about her. At that time, right? But she kept going and kept going and kept going and kept growing and kept growing. And she met some great friends along the way, met some real estate investors. She moved to that other town. She got some great friends there. She learned how to discern. But it's so important that you understand if you are in an unhealthy relationship of any kind, whether it be your primary relationship, like your marriage, or friendships or coworkers, if there's an unhealthy relationship in your life that you aren't cleaning up or addressing or leaving or healing or whatever, It's going to be harder for you. So that may be the work that you need to do. I know it's not pretty. It's ugly to have to say that. Okay. So she had started with a negative net worth. She became consumer debt free in 19 months. And she started putting all the money she had in debt payments into investments. And 7 years, 8 months later, she had a seven-figure net worth. And you know what was really funny is it was actually 7 years and 7 months. And I made this slide last night and I did this little presentation for my husband. I was like, can I just run through this with you, make sure I'm not missing anything? Like, ask me any questions so I can put it in the slides, if whatever. He goes, 7 years, 7 months, seven-figure net worth. That's cool. And I was like, I'm going to make that 8 months because it doesn't look believable. And that's what really happened. So I changed it to 7 years and 8 months so that you guys would know it was real. But it was 7 years, 7 months for her to get to seven-figure net worth. So I say all that because it took her, I mean, she had a different income level than the other gals and all of that, but she is somebody who previously believed that there was no way she was ever going to get there because she was stupid, she was disorganized, she couldn't handle it. Everything, she had this outlook that like everything in life bad always happens to me. And when something would go wrong, she'd go, oh, of course. Like she just was always expecting awful things to happen. And when we moved her into this position where she started to look for what was possible and what was good came right flying at her face so quickly. Okay, so here's your very last recap. You're uncovering a new version of you. The version of you that got you here cannot take you there. In what ways can you increase the percentage that you show up this week? How can you dial it up just a little bit more? What could you do a little bit differently? What can you commit to this week? What can you immediately implement or what can you immediately cease or stop? What are the things that you can do? Again, now that you've looked at, we did 3 times. So if you were to look at everything that you learned, what is the thing that you could do that would change everything for the better? Go ahead and type that in the chat box. And while you're typing all that, I just want to say thank you first and foremost for your attention. Thank you for becoming a subscriber of this YouTube channel. We hope to do more of these for you. This link will be available for you for replay. So if you want to come back to it or you want to share it with somebody, you can send somebody you love and trust the link. It's not a public link, but you can share it with everybody you know. You could put it on your Facebook if you wanted. We trust you. But this is a gift for you. And if you loved it and you want to see more of it, just let us know because happy to do this kind of thing and gather you all together. Because I know that some of you are going to be in this case study sometime soon. And I can't wait to see. I mean, I think I know who it is. It's pretty much all of you because you've been hanging on this whole time. And so when you're the type of person who commits to learning and commits to doing things, we know you're going to have success. So love you to a million billion pieces. Thank you for being such a great supporter. Amanda's going to move 10% into her RSP. See what I did there? In case she happens to be a people pleaser. Now she's got to do it because the whole entire internet knows. Cheyenne's going to do 10% more strategy. Kristen's going to cook at home 50% more than last week. That's so great. This is great. Tracking my commitments. So lovely. You guys are going to kill it. I love you. I'm proud of you. We will see you. Well,